Thanks for joining this webinar on leveraging Adobe and Microsoft Cloud Services in Sage 300 using Extender. Orchid added workflow functionality to Extender about 2 years ago, and we then launched the Remote Action Service last year, as well as the Workflow Anywhere mobile app. So in this presentation, we will review how these products help us leverage cloud services in Sage 300. And for this, we will go through 3 scenarios. One to approve AP invoice batches using Adobe Sign and Sage 300. One where a customer digitally signs a Sage 300 quote to convert it to an order using Adobe Sign again. And finally, we will look at automation and collaboration in the Sage 300 ordering process, looking at Microsoft Teams and Microsoft SharePoint. We have discussed the benefits of hybrid cloud solutions previously, in the context of remote working particularly. And while remote working is not big news anymore, it is probably here to stay for a long while. Hybrid cloud solution help you build on your solid on-premises Sage 300 solution to enhance the processes and support a more digital and remote workforce. It provides cost-effective customizations and flexibility. You have flexibility in how you're going to approve the records, how you're going to store and access the documents, and you can change your processes and your workflow as your business changes through the interface. In our first scenario, we'll demonstrate using Adobe Sign to digitally sign and approve AP invoice batches. A user submits an AP invoice batch for approval in Sage 300. Before the batch can be made ready to post, the workflow will has been configured to create an agreement in Adobe Sign. The approvers will then sign in Adobe Sign, so they don't need to log on to Sage 300. When all the documents have been signed and the Adobe Sign agreement is completed, we use Remote Action Service to retrieve the completed agreements into Sage 300, which will then post the batch. The documents are also filed away in a folder configured in Document Management link, so a user who logs on to Sage 300 can then view the signed documents and the posted batches. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you for attending the webinar today. What I'm actually going to demonstrate for you is a Extender workflow functionality combined with the Remote Action Service, which allows users to approve transactions inside of Sage without actually logging into Sage, and that actually combined and integrated with the Adobe Sign platform in order to actually get signatures on approvals for things inside of Sage. So the first thing I'm going to show you is approval around an AP invoice batch. So if I open my invoice batch list here, there we go. And I'll just quickly create a new test batch. There we are. We'll name it test batch 314. Use my favorite vendor 1200. Throw in any document number here. And we'll just put in the one entry into the batch just to make things easy. Click add and close that. So we've got our new batch here, test batch 314. And the Extender workflow, it's kicked off based on a status change of the batch. So me double clicking this ready to post no and changing it to yes is actually what is going to trigger the Extender workflow. So you see it working in the background now. The workflow is kicking off and it's generating an Adobe Sign agreement, and it's going to email that agreement to the approvers that we've set up for AP invoice batches. So in a second, you'll see, there we go. Approval required to set batch ready to post. Approvers have been notified and the batch status remains open. So you'll notice that it was not set ready to post. We're able to set it back so that you can't post it. And it can only be allowed to set ready to post once everything has been approved. So if I close the AP invoice batch, I look in my emails, there we go. So I've received the email requesting my signature on this AP invoice batch. If I click on the email and click review and sign, it'll take me to Adobe Sign. And we've generated a PDF of the AP invoice batch so that the users who are approving can review all of the information that they would normally get inside of Sage. So they can review, evaluate, and approve if they think everything looks good. All they have to do is click here to sign, put in their signature. I'm just going to use my name and apply it. Once that's done, you say click to sign to complete the process. Now it tells you you're all set. And at this point, this actual AP invoice batch requires 2 sets of approvals. So if I refresh my email here, I've received another email as the second approver. I would do the exact same thing as the first. I can click this review and sign button, review the AP invoice batch. Once it loads, there it is. So once it's loading, or it's done loading, you can review the AP invoice batch just like the first approver could. You see the first approver's signature on it as well, so that carries through. And then I can put my own, just do S, and the same thing, click to sign to complete the process. It tells you you're all set. And then whoever submitted the document would actually receive an email telling them that AP invoice batch 132 between Popular Development, whoever created it, was signed and filed by Scott and S. So to bring those approvals back into Sage, all you actually need to do is go into Extender and run the remote action poller. What the poller does is reach out to Adobe Sign to see if that document has been completed and then brings those approvals back into Sage. This can also be run using Orchid's process scheduler. So you can have it run every hour, every morning, maybe every night, just to pull in all the approvals that were done, say, for that day. In my case, I'm just going to run it manually, so I just double click. So as soon as I double click on it, it's reaching out to Adobe Sign. And eventually you will see the invoice batch automatically posting, and then it will notify me that one approval was brought in successfully. So just wait for that message to tell you everything is all good. There it is. Posting complete. 1 approval is applied successfully. Click OK. And if you go take a look at the AP invoice batch, test batch 314 that we just created is now posted. And another nice feature is that as part of the workflow, once the approval is completed, everything is signed, we actually download copies of that PDF with the signatures on it, as well as an audit trail for you to use for audit purposes, of course. And what I've actually done here is, using Orchid's document management link, created a little link to where those files are stored, so that when you go back and look at the batch inside of Sage, you can open up the actual signed PDF, check for the signatures. There's the S and Scott. We've got both our signatures there. And you can also check the audit trail. So if we open that up, we can see created by me, emailed to me, and all the way down, see who it was signed by, all the way until it's completed. So that is the approvals around an AP invoice batch using Adobe Sign.
Thank you, Scott. Our first scenario demonstrated using Adobe Sign to digitally sign and approve AP invoice batches. The main benefits of this approach is that you end up with legally binding signatures. The approvals can happen without the users having to log on to Sage 300. And the users who need access to Sage 300 have all the relevant documents at their fingertips with no additional work. So this fosters a culture of collaboration and productivity improvements at the same time. A similar solution can be developed using DocuSign or other such electronic signature tools. It is built on Extender workflow to configure the approval, how many approvers you had, under what conditions the approval happens, and you could use a similar example for PO requisition or AP payment batches. In our second scenario, we'll demonstrate a quote to order process using Adobe Sign to digitally sign the quote. The quote is created in Sage 300. and that starts the workflow. Workflow will create an agreement in Adobe Sign, and that includes the quote PDF. And this will also then send the customer all the relevant notifications for them to sign. The customer can then sign the quote and accept the quote using Adobe Sign. When the agreement is signed in Adobe Sign, which means the quote has been accepted, Remote Action then retrieves the sign agreement and converts the quote to a Sage 300 order. The Sage 300 users can then process the order like normal in Sage 300 and at the same time view all the relevant signed documents from the client. Over to you, Scott.
So now I'd like to demonstrate to you what we call the quote to order workflow. What that quote to order workflow utilizes is the Extender's workflow functionality, along with the Remote Action service and the Adobe Sign integration. What the quote to order workflow does is you create a quote inside of Sage in order entry. That quote, once it's posted, gets sent out to your customer. The customer signs off on it, and then that approval gets brought back into Sage and automatically creates the order for you. So let me just show you how it works. If I go into my order entry screen, and I will create a new quote here for vendor 1200 quote. I will add an item to the line, fluorescent desk lamp. Let's say we order 20 of those. So as soon as I click post, in the background, Extender is working and kicking off the workflow. You can see it loading. So what it's doing is creating a PDF of a form for the quotation and sending that through Adobe Sign to the customer to get signed off on. So in a second, there you go, you will be notified that the quote will be promoted once signed off by the customer. So if I close this and take a look at my email, which would be the customer's email, I would have received a document from Adobe Sign asking for my signature. So I click the email, I click review and sign, and it'll bring up this PDF copy of that quote. So as the customer, I would get this, I can review it. If everything looks good, I would just scroll down and put my signature right here, just like any other e-signing platform. So I'll just put my name, Scott, click apply, and then click to sign. And that completes the process. So now it tells me I'm all set. I can close that down. As the person who submitted the quote, I would also get an email notifying me that the quote has been signed and filed. So it's Adobe themselves are notifying you of the completion of the quote. And if I go back into Sage, I can also check the status of the quote. So that's another little extra thing we've thrown into the workflow is what if the user has access or has a workflow user license and can access the workflow console, they can come into the workflow console, they can check the progress of the quote itself. So you see this is the one that we just created, quote 25. So they can click this open document button. And what that does is brings them to the document in Adobe Sign and shows them if it's been signed or not. So it brings them here, and you can scroll down. If nobody had signed it, that would be empty, but now they can see that it has been signed. So they can sort of track the progress of the document. So I exit out of that. And now to bring that approval back into Sage, I have to run my remote action poller. I can do that with Process Scheduler, schedule it to run hourly, daytime, nighttime, and first thing in the morning, after hours, whatever it may be. You can schedule it to run with Process Scheduler, or you can have somebody come in and click on the poller manually, and that will have the remote action service reach out to Adobe Sign and bring that approval into Sage. Once that approval is brought into Sage, the workflow is configured to automatically create the order entry from the quote. So if we just give the poller a minute to reach out, bring that approval in, it will notify us once the approval has been applied. There we go. We've got our notification, one approval applied successfully. And at this point, I've also configured the workflow to send another email to the originating user, telling them that this quote has been promoted to this order, just so they have each document number with them. So I'm going to take that document number, order 124, and now we can go into order entry. And if I paste that order number there, that's the new order, tab off, that should bring up the order that was now created from the quote. So we've got our fluorescent desk lamp, we've ordered 20 units. And if we drill down, we can see that this order was created from quote 25, which is the one that we had submitted for our customer's approval. So that is the Extender workflow, working with Remote Action and the Adobe Sign integration to easily promote quotes to orders in Sage.
Thank you, Scott, for this presentation on using Adobe Sign, Remote Action Service and Extender workflow to accept and sign a quote and convert it to an order. Before we move on to our third and final scenario, let's have a quick look at how Remote Action and Adobe Sign work. An Extender workflow instance starts when the AP invoice batch is set to ready to post, when a quote is inserted, and this can be tailored to your requirements. It can work only on certain types of quotes if an optional field is set to something, or for a quote over a certain amount. It works with batches, master files and transactions such as order entry and purchase orders on Sage 300 core modules, as well as third-party software development kit developed modules such as RMA. The solution incorporates the workflow benefits and flexibility in the configuration. So you can have different approvers based on the amount, the customer type. You can have multi-step approvals. And there are lots of examples of this in the video resources section of the Orchid website. In these examples, when the workflow starts, it is connected to the Remote Action Adobe Sign service. So we create an agreement in Adobe Sign using the Sage 300 reports to PDF the quote or the AP invoice batch. Then Adobe Sign is configured to send the notification to the approvers, and the approvers don't need to log on to Sage 300. They can follow the Adobe Sign notification, review the document, and sign as required as per the Adobe Sign process. When this is all complete, Remote Action service combined with Process Scheduler to automate that retrieval process. They retrieve the details of the completed Adobe Sign agreements and save the document in the configured folder and keep progressing the workflow, as in converting the quote to an order. So you don't need to open a port on your firewall. It is the Remote Action service, the Polar service, that is connecting to the cloud-based service. So the main benefits of this approach is that the approvers don't need to log on to Sage 300 to sign and approve. They can approve on any device, and you end up with a legally binding signature. This is building on the Remote Action Service functionality that was launched a year ago, and you would have seen demonstration there where the service sends an email with a one-time form to progress the workflow. So if you need to approve the records outside of Sage 300 but don't need a legally binding signature, you can use Remote Action Service and Extender workflow without Adobe Sign. In our third and final scenario, we move away from approvals and take over where the quote to order process left us. We're now working directly on an order, which we're going to ship an invoice. We will demonstrate entering a new order directly in Sage 300, as some of the orders don't start with a quote, and we will review some automations that are available in the ordering process. Extender will warn us if the sales margin is low. The workflow has then been configured to post a notification in Microsoft Teams when a new order is created in Sage 300. When we ship an invoice, Extender will automatically create a PDF of the invoice and email it to the OE invoice contacts configured against the customer using multiple contact. Finally, back in Sage 300, the users can then view the invoices and other documents saved on the network folder as well as in SharePoint using Document Management link. So for this, I'm now going to hand over to Anne.
Steve receives a PO 456, from Custom Comfort for the new screens and desk pads, and he takes notes of the agreed price of $140 for the large screens. Steve goes to enter this order for customer 1500 and filling in the details that he knows are needed for the referencing of this order. And when adding the screen, he's going to override the unit price to $140. And when he posts the order, he gets the warning message that the sales margin is less than the 10% minimum set for this company. We could have designed an error message which prevented the order from being saved, or we could have had a workflow being automatically started, requiring approval before the order could be shipped and invoiced. For this order, though, it's just a warning message, so he can go ahead and save the order. Anne sees the new notification in Teams for the new order and notes that the screens have been sold at a special price, so needs to check that. Anne goes to view this order in Order Entry. And notes that Steve has changed the unit price to $140 for the screens, and checks that in the contract, which is stored in SharePoint for this particular customer, that the new contracted price is $140. And also notes that the average price that for this item for this customer is $177, and that's been the history over the last financial year. Nevertheless, seeing so the pricing agrees to the contract, she goes ahead to ship an invoice. And knowing that Custom Comfort are waiting for their invoice, clicks the button to create the PDF for this particular invoice, Invoice 93, which will be filed away for Document Management link and emailed to the customer. So the first notification we get is that the Invoice 93 PDF has been created and now emailed to the customer based on the customer's email preference. The first email is sent to Natalie, and the second email is sent to David. And Invoice 93 is filed away for this customer, Custom Comfort, for subsequent access. The PDF could have been produced automatically when the invoice was created and the email sent without clicking the Email Invoice button. And similarly, the email messages could be sent without having to confirm OK. These were just left in so we could see what was happening. The email was sent to both Natalie and David for customer 1500 because we had configured multiple contacts for customer 1500. And on the Contact tab, both Natalie and David have been flagged to receive the OE invoice. And we can see in our email notifications that 2 emails were sent to Natalie and to David. and checking either Natalie or David's email, we see they have invoice 93 with the PDF attached of the invoice and details of the invoice, controlled by the message template. And here we see the 2 items with the pricing we expected. And just as the documents can be made available for viewing in order entry, we can configure the same documents to be available in the customer inquiry screen. So we have all the invoices that have been issued to this customer and the contract in SharePoint. And when we highlight a specific individual invoice, it can be highlighted and isolated in this box here.
Thanks, Anne. Our third scenario demonstrated how Sage 300 users can collaborate using Microsoft Teams platform. They can automate printing processes and make documents available in Sage 300. Documents can be saved in a network folder, in a shared drive, or in SharePoint. Finally, a reminder that Workflow Anywhere is available for users who want to use the Extender Workflow console on a mobile device to view and approve workflow instances. Workflow Anywhere is a mobile app version of the Extender Workflow console developed by AutoSimpli in conjunction with Orchid. Mobile users can view the workflow assigned to them or group they're in. They can action the workflow from the app, approve or reject an approval, acknowledge a notification. The app is available in Google Play, Apple Store, and Windows Microsoft Store. You configure the workflows you need using Extender, as we've demonstrated in some of the examples today. Install the web service, download the app in your App Store, and you can start using it. There is a demo presentation and a more detailed training video available on the Orchid website, so we won't cover that today. In this presentation, we have looked at scenarios in accounts payable and order entry. The scenarios show how you can build tailored and efficient processes integrating Sage 300 and cloud services to improve collaboration among team members. We have looked at examples with Adobe Sign for digital signatures, Microsoft Teams for collaboration, and SharePoint to share documents. Similar solutions can be built with other platforms such as DocuSign. To get started with what we have demonstrated today, we're using a range of Orchid modules. Document Management Link, which provides easy access to essential documents from Sage 300 screens. The documents can be saved on a network folder or on a shared drive or in SharePoint. We use Extender as a platform to configure and customize Sage 300. The customizations are held in the database. You can upgrade by just activating the latest version of Extender, and in many cases, customization will work on both the web screens and the desktop screens, such as starting the workflow automatically. We have demonstrated Remote Action Service and Workflow Anywhere to provide workflow functionality without logging into the Sage 300 desktop. And you can refer to the Orchid website for more information. In particular, you can refer to the newly launched Extender Marketplace to find details about solutions built using Extender. So now, let's move to Q&A. Okay, thanks for your time. And as you know, you're all in listen-only mode, so please put any questions you have in the questions box. And we have a few questions already, so let's get started. Do we need to purchase the Adobe Sign separately? Yes, you need the Adobe Sign separately. We can also, with Poplar, assist you with hosting Adobe Sign, and really depends on how many documents you think you're going to sign. You need to have signed. So the best is to have a look at Adobe Sign, get in touch with us, and see what works for you. What products are required for the solutions, the presentations that we've looked at today? And that's showing on the screen, and then when I'll make Anne the presenter a bit later, and she will show us in a bit more detail what is required. But for all the scenarios we've looked at today, you do need Extender in configurator or developer, but most of what we've looked at today would require the Extender developer, since we have tailored the workflow to our specific requirements. And the remote action service is, which you may have seen in prior presentations from last year, is required for this one-off emails to approve, and it now includes the Adobe Sign integration. So again, in terms of pricing, get in touch with Robert Lavery and his team to get the detailed pricing that applies to you and your country, your region. And then, depending on what you want to do with the workflow, you would need workflow users as well to access the console and be able to approve within with Sage 300. Now, we have looked at document management link in terms of displaying the documents in Sage 300, whether it is in SharePoint or in your network folder. If you're using SharePoint, you then need a subscription to Office 365 that includes SharePoint, or your own install of SharePoint, depending on how it's configured. To post to Microsoft Teams, you need a subscription to Microsoft Teams, which again is often part of your Office 365 subscription. Have a few other questions there before I hand over to Anne. In one of our scenario, we looked at a warning with a sales margin being too low. Yes, it did come on the web screen, and that is a script that is triggered when the view is it's a view script, so it's happening automatically when something changes in Sage 300, and those types of scripts work in the web screen as well as on the desktop screens. And it was configured to show a message on the screen, but it could be configured to send an email to a manager when the order is posted, or to start a workflow for a manager to approve, depending on what you're trying to do. Yes, we will make the video available in the next couple of days, and you will be able to share it with your clients if appropriate. Ballpark cost for software. Get in touch with us sort of outside of the presentation. Pricing is sort of region specific, so we'll your distributor or your Sage partner or Robert Lavery can help you with the pricing. So I'm now going to hand over to Anne to show us the modules that were required. There we go. For the order entry scenario, and show us how to configure the workflow for Microsoft Teams.
Thanks, Natalie. So the list of software that Natalie showed you was what was needed to do the workflow, send the agreement to Adobe Sign using the Polar to Remote Action Service to bring it back down, and a process scheduler if you want to automate the Polar. But the scenario that I demonstrated, which was entering the order entry order, getting the warning message for the margin not being enough, and then clicking this button, email an invoice, which emailed the customer the PDF version of the invoice, as well as and it went to both to the two contacts that were flagged to receive the invoice, as well as saving the PDF for document management link. So what you need for this is Extender adds the warning message when the margin is too low. Extender adds these two buttons. So this one I wanted to email the customer the order confirmation, and this one emails the customer the invoice. Document management link to view the saved PDF against the order entry screen, and then the customer inquiry, any other screens that you want to see that document. Also, document management link to show us the agreement that is with the customer for special pricing stored in SharePoint. And the to be able to calculate the average price for this item, for this customer, for the last financial year, that is Extender, but it's notes that's showing us this particular note. So in this case, we need Extender to do the buttons, to do the sales warning margin, and to do these calculations. Notes to display the year-to-date sales calculated by Extender and the average sales price for this item calculated by Extender, and document management link to show us the invoices that are saved away and in the network folder and saved away in SharePoint, as well as to create the PDF and email it to the customer when the invoice is created. Is there an updated sample company of this? In our Orc Limited, we do have buttons to this email, the confirmation, which emails it to the customer, not using multiple contacts, but just emails it to the customer, and does the sales margin warning, is in our sample data, Orc Ltd, for version 2021 and version 2020. This button, which allows you to email to multiple contacts and PDF the invoice, will be loaded to our sample scripts area or our app area in the next couple of days. These notes here are in our sample data Orc Ltd. The posting through to Teams, the script to do the posting through to Teams is also in our custom script area, but it's not live in any of our databases. But if you import that script and do the configuration that I show you, you will be able to post through to Teams. So that leads me to the setup of the Teams script. So when I created the sales order, I created it using the web screens, but it was the view script of inserting the sales order that kicked off the notification workflow template. So not all your workflow templates need to result in somebody approving or rejecting. It could just be a notification. So when the order is inserted, then this particular single step workflow template is kicked off. It sets some drill down and description, assigns it to the appropriate user. This custom action, which can be downloaded from our custom scripts, builds up a workflow template variable, which has the list of items, so that you could publish that into Teams easily. Then it sends an email, and the final thing it does here is it runs this Orchid Teams workflow.add Teams card. So this script will actually, the module is on our website because there's a supporting table that you need to enter some information in. But let me just go on to the details here. And this whole when you create a channel in Teams, then when you follow the instructions from Microsoft on how to create a webhook into that channel, you will be given this whole long description, including at the left-hand side your your Teams HTTPS address. So you once you've created the channel, you say, give me a webhook for this, and you paste that whole long thing into the URL here, and then this particular script would create a Teams notification when the order was created. The contents of the Teams notification is built up through the title, which we had new order, and then the description of the order, and then we put in the customer number, then a new line, the salesperson, and it said RW, then a new line entered by, and it said Steve, and then a new line, and then it had the 2 items that they ordered with the quantity in brackets. And that is how the Teams notification was created. And after creating the Teams notification, it completes the workflow. So your workflows don't have to have approval steps or reject steps. It could just be a notification method, and this one was a notification through Teams. And it also sent an email as well. Would Extender work with Sage CRM? Prabha, if that question is if you create the sales order through Sage CRM, so the answer is yes, because Sage CRM calls the Sage web screens, which in turn calls the views to do the insert, and the workflow would be triggered just in exactly the same way as me creating the order through the web screens without CRM. But it's not active around CRM objects, but it is active around any view updates or inserts that Sage CRM does.
Thanks for that. And similarly to how we're configuring Teams in there by entering a long number that really corresponds to a unique token and password for this channel. When you configure the Adobe Sign solution, it is a similar configuration where you have to enter a couple of tokens that are provided by Adobe Sign to allow the integration to work. So it's not a very complicated configuration to set up. Since we have had a few questions on web screens, I think we can, a reminder that the web screens for EFT processing are now available for AP and AR. Most of the transactions and setup screens were released in the latest product update about 2 months ago. And we are currently working on document management link, so we don't have a release date for that, but that's the next web screen module that we are working on. We have a question here on AP invoice, approving AP invoice batches, and what happens when we need to reject a document, a particular invoice in that batch. So at the moment, the workflow can be attached to at the batch level. So it can only be attached at the batch level or a master file such as customer or vendor or GL account, or transaction files such as a purchase requisition or an AE order. When you're doing it at the batch level, you can either approve the whole batch or reject the whole batch. So if you need to reject one transaction in the current setup, you would need to reject the whole batch, make a comment that entry number 2 is not right or is not coded correctly, or whatever is the reason. The person would then update the batch or delete the entry or do whatever it is they need to do, and then resubmits the batch for approval. There are solutions using custom scripts that you can have developed, and we're also working for a way to make the workflow work at the actual AP invoice document level, but that is not available yet. Don't know if we have, can't see any other questions. If we have missed anything, please get in touch with us. We'll send you the link to the webinar in the next couple of days. And yeah, we will upload a couple of new scripts to the extended script section, such as emailing to multiple contacts. And we will be updating our sample data for when we release version 2022 in the next few months. So you probably will see some of the configuration that we have shown in here in the new sample data for 2022. Thanks for your time and your feedback and questions. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks for attending. And yes, we look forward to chatting to you all next month with